Gender is an important consideration in development. It is a way of looking how social norms and power structures impact on the lives and opportunities available to different groups of men and women. Globally, more women than men live in poverty. The purpose of gender and development is to ensure that both men and women can participate in and benefit from development in a way that it is equitable. Let us start by defining how sex differs from individual categories. When we say sex, this refers to the biological characteristics that define men and women. By simply speaking, they can be recognizable on how body structure and anatomy shapes the external and internal parts of the human system. Both men and women naturally differs on biological setup. We can classify the difference from genitalia, the internal reproductive organs, the scientific identity of their chromosomes, and the components of their hormones. This biological makeup separates the identity of men from women. By the looks of the reproductive organs, both sexes are unique in a way. They function differently, and these functions are beneficial when both meets accordingly. Sciences defines their unique purpose, and how they interrelate their function is something that is very special in the procreation process. Their unique and natural characteristics are non-negotiable. Anything that has been made naturally cannot be altered. Women menstruated while men do not. Women have developed breasts that are usually capable of lactating while men have not. And even men would allow breast augmentation, the fact remains he could not provide lactation. Women can give birth. Along the way, men can supply sperm and women could not. Men have testicles while women do not have. And whether science finds way to change the natural placement, there could always be limitations that changes. Because what's natural could not be easily changed. Although there are minor and major alterations, but again, there are certain limitations. When we say gender, it is not about talking physiological and biological makeup. It is about the characteristics of women, men, girls, and boys that are socially constructed regardless with their sexes. This includes norms, behaviors, and roles associated with being a woman, a man, a girl, or a boy, as well as the relationships with each other. As a social construct, gender varies from society to society and can change over time. Meaning, sexes are fixed, but gender will change from time to time. One can be conclusive with the sex of an individual, but no one can directly define the gender of a person. Academically speaking, gender is flexible to both men and women. In our society, there are several institutions that affect gender power relations. The family, as a basic unit of society, has the most influential power that could either create gender-biased perceptions or empowerment, or gender empowerment. It is within the family where children could learn the balance between men and women, or they could learn gender divisions in terms of authority and power. Therefore, parents must be very careful in treating children within the family because what they learn and observe in the household will be cascaded to their communities as they grow. Let us take a look at how most of our families see roles and responsibilities at home. Oftentimes, our children will see that the father is the one responsible for the material well-being of the wife, the children, and elderly dependents, while the mother is responsible for the emotional and spiritual welfare of the family unit. There are even instances that parents would say at home, dahil kayo ay lalaki, ito ang mga gagawin nyo kasi ito ang mga gawaing panlalaki. Kayo naman, ang mga babae, ito ang gagawin ninyo kasi ito ang mga gawaing pambabae. And by that way of introducing things, these children grow up thinking that there is always division of tasks between men and women, believing that one cannot do it because it is the responsibility of one gender. Most people also associated colors with gender. Blue are commonly associated with men, and pink are associated to women. And when there are interchanging that will happen, people would brand one person of different connotations. And where did this orientation started? It boils down to how families and parents rear their children and put some interpretations between colors and gender. Stereotyping, as it is called, happened first in the family, where parents and children are to choose what is being said as appropriate colors for men and for women. Ang aking tanong ngayon, kaninong teorya ang nagsasabi na ang bawat kulay ay kumakatawan sa pagkatao ng isang lalaki o isang babae? At kung sila ay maaaring magpalit ng kulay ayon sa kanilang kinagisnang paniniwala, mag-iiba ba ang kanilang pagkalalaki o pagkababae? Clothes are even misinterpreted by some family members as to what's for boys and what's for girls. Although in today's time, more and more parents are becoming open and modernized about it, but there are still families who believe that only boys should wear pants. And if girls will wear one, they already pose misconceptions of her identity. Although at some circumstances, there are actually outfits that are good only for men and good only for women, but there is no need to put association of gender stereotyping and clothing. There is no actually problem on what you wear. The problem lies on how a person take it and associate it with gender bias perceptions. Most men believe that guns are only for boys and Barbie dolls are always for girls. Even parents would reprimand their children if they see that toys are being switched according to how they see what toys are appropriate for boys and for girls. Ang aking tanong, kapag ang babae ba naglalaro ng baril-barilan, nag-iiba na ba ang kanyang pagkatao? O kung ang lalaki ay maglalaro ng bahay-bahayan, magiging masama ba siyang tao paglaki niya? Ito ang mga pangyayaring kadalasang nakikita natin na naging realidad. Who says toys are made only specifically for boys or specifically made only for girls? Until now, there are still parents who puts division between boys and girls when it comes to choosing playmates. Some do not allow their children to mix with playmates of opposite sexes or mixed sexes because they have this thinking that gender formation might be influenced by their playmates. Akala tuloy natin ito'y sakit na nakakahawa. Mind you, gender is even a personal choice. And when children grow up, they choose the genders they like. The common fairy tales that children grow up would allow them to believe that only there are kings and princes who are men and who are superior than queens and princesses who are women. That kings and princes possess powers, while queens and princesses are just present to follow orders. The stories that kings and princes would always rescue their queens and princesses because they are weaker than men and they need men to rely on. This show bias cinematic expression and melodramas. Next is our schools. Our schools have the second responsibility in taking bold steps in shaping gender equality. What about our textbooks, the language, the curriculum itself, the learning materials, the career options should make clear connections to gender and development. In nursery and kindergarten classes, boys and girls are taught what toys and games are appropriate for their gender. Just like, for example, heavy blocks, trucks, airplanes, and carpentry for boys, and dolls and homemaking equipment for girls. There was even an instance where one teacher asked me why only home economics will be offered for the second quarter, specifically for K-Stage 2. I answered back that it is a regional order to allow the children to focus on the essential of TLE specialization in this time of pandemic, which is also basic and one of the most important. Ang sagot niya is, paano daw ang mga lalaki? Kapag home economics daw, halos puro pambabae. Ang tanong ko, paano naging pambabae ang mga gawain tulad ng paglilinis ng bahay at kapaligiran, pagluluto, pag-aayos ng sarili at ng kanyang mga kagamitan, kung saan ito ay basically itinuturo sa home economics? Ibig sabihin ba dahil siya ay lalaki, pwedeng hindi na siya maglinis, hindi na magluto, hindi mag-ayos ng bahay kasi nagiging bias ito para sa kanya? So if teachers do not understand gender and development and the role of education in shaping gender and development, what will our education or what will education in our community will look like? And what kind of generation are we producing if that is how the way we think? We will eventually produce more stereotypes in our society. In school, the way we greet our learners and divide them according to sex show bias. For example, greeting them separately emphasizes the differences between males and females. The notions that males excel in mathematics, sciences, and technology, and women excel in arts are two of the many cultural beliefs and cultural influences that are passed down through generations, and until now, it is still difficult to detach. The idea that the boys and girls are naturally better at certain things are still existing in our schools. In our classroom practices, we often do these things. We call on boys more often and spend more time with them, ask boys more challenging questions, specifically when teachers saw that they started to become unruly, or they will wait longer for boys to answer because teachers wanted them to answer. In some cases, teachers urge boys to try harder, constantly telling the boys that they can do it, while for girls, when they answer it already, it's enough. And this is always the reality. Let us take a look at our textbooks. Our textbooks sometimes underscore the appropriate tasks for males and females. When children will see this picture, they will grow up bringing these thoughts that there are always certain things for men and certain things for women. Our textbook images sometimes trigger inequality among our learners. The pictures will sometimes favor only one persona, and even sample of professions are associated with sexes and genders. Pag teacher, babae; pag doktor, lalaki; pag pulis, lalaki; pag beautician, babae. These are proliferating within the bounds of our learning materials that would lead to confusion to our learners. The church also influences how young children see inequality as they grow up. More men are serving the altars than women. It is good now that there are altar servers who are women already, but still women are outnumbered by men. Church groups are mostly composed of women, and leaders will take charge of leading the Bible sharing, and others are mostly men. We cannot blame that because biblically and historically, men are more recognized than women, and it becomes traditional that we're passed on to generations. Now, churches have been involving women, but again, there are fewer women leaders than men. And when we look at advertisements, radio and TV programs, news articles, and highlights and other forms, more men dominates the time slot rather than women. In films, we will see that more men are always on the front lines and women are just supporting actresses, which shows weak roles who are too dependent to men. The society looks at men as a powerful image who will catch all the attentions and authority. The society always considered an ideal man as sexy when he have bigger biceps, six-packs abs, manly in looks, and gorgeously handsome. Minsan, tinitingnan lang ng iba ang laki ng katawan, pero hindi nila nakikita ang laki ng kanyang kahinaan. Lalaki kasi, yun minsan ang pangangatwiran. However, women are in contrary. The society always accepts that women are sexy when they have smaller hips, they are thin, they have white skin, and beautiful like a Barbie. And when women are getting beyond the prescribed looks and capacity branded for them, these women will become subject to bullying and body shaming. In sports, mostly it's dominated by men because most people believe that men can transmit powerful ideas about manliness and masculinity. Men, as an athlete, is considered as big, strong, gutsy, and brilliant. Most often, men are called by their last names and they are very hooked to popularity when their last names are being called. There are also this reality that most men are fond of sports which are somehow showing violent masculinity. Men are likely to praise athletes who continue to play while injured. They love telling stories of athletes emphasizing language of conflict and war to describe the action or even demonstrate violence and aggression as exciting and rewarding behavior. Isang halimbawa, sa boxing, pag nataob ang kalaban, nagalusan, hindi na makahinga, nasuntok, napuruhan, nasaktan, na knockout, ang saya ng mga kalalakihan. After the contest, all they have to say is, that is sports. That is part of the game. But the question is it okay? In reality, only 2% of women occupy the sports airtime. Women athletes are plugged as panic, fatigue, weary, vulnerable. And women in sports are usually called in their first names. What comes worst is that photos of women are being sexualized and emphasizes the beauty rather than the game. In reality also, men are always presented in media as successful and have a good life. Men are mostly the symbol of shaping the future because they are branded always as firm, decisive, strong, and always possess leadership qualities. Along the way, women are misinterpreted as gauged by their ability to catch a man or an eager male companion. Most of their advertising are focused on slenderness, dieting, attaining a feminine ideal, as not just thin but also weak and vulnerable. Most beer advertisements used images of women who are defined as sexy by using photographs that are exposing too much parts of the body. In business and marketing, most men penetrates the business operations and executive positions than women. Most men are higher in company positions, and there are outnumbered women who heads the companies. There are even more cases of women who are subjected to trafficking and sexual harassment. When it comes to executive and legislative positions, more and more men became the members of this policy-making body compared to women. Women become outnumbered in political participation and representation because they believe that men are more strategic and firm than women. Because of uneven and unjust gender power relations, women and men are boxed into situations which constrain their capacity to do and their capacity to be. Both men and women have been curtailed by the freedom to choose and decide on matters pertaining to improvement of life because they are controlled by the biases that surrounds their community. Their capacities are becoming slimmer because the society dictates them what to do and what should be. When we control the capacity to do of our men and women because of gender bias, we prevent them to grow and be productive and satisfy work. We prevent them to enjoy nature and the natural environment. We prevent them to procreate and rear children. And we prevent them to care for others and to travel in search of opportunities. When we control the capacity of our men and women because of gender bias, we deprive them to be knowledgeable and skillful. We deprive them to be healthy. We deprive them to be confident of own abilities. We provide them to be comfortable with achievements, independence, and power. If our society controls our men and women, they will not grow accordingly. So what are the gender issues now? And how would we allow ourselves to understand gender and development? And what tangible steps are we going to design in order to balance how our men and women live equally? First, we have to understand that it is not only women who are suffering from biases and wrong thoughts. Men also, along the way, are being judged with unfair notions coming from the different units of the society. The society believes that men are inherently aggressive and violent, that they don't feel pain or incapable of experiencing human relations, that men are inherently expressive in their sexuality and don't need closeness, reassurance, and attention. But in the contrary, men as human beings also have their soft spot and weaknesses that needs considerations. How about for women? What are the gender issues and biases that affect women more? Number 1, marginalization in the economic sphere. Little opportunities are given for career advancement because most trainings are available or accessible to men only. Although most women we know are empowered individuals, but there are more women out there who are suffering from any forms of abuse and marginalization. Second, subordination in the political sphere. Few women in decision-making, including at home. Only 10% of women, or only 10% are women in most legislators and promotions, are slow, and even some leadership positions are not for women. Third one is gender stereotyping. Kinakahon ang mga babae. Most of them serve only as assistants to men's place, assistant to the men's role, assistant to the men's work, which prevents women from full enjoyment of rights and expression of her talents. And the last one is the multiple burden. Women must still do the household chores after the long 8 hours in the office. Men are not expected to do housework, or some do housework, but only when they want to. So what are the manifestations of gender bias? Gender bias will likely result to violence against women. This includes all forms of gender violence, which drives women constantly in fear of abuse. Their freedoms are curtailed, and even legal and judicial systems are not gender sensitive. So what will happen to our men and women who are controlled by our biased society? Our women will no longer build self-esteem, self-determination, and self-actualization. Their self-esteem becomes low, and there might be lack of self-confidence and eventually do not set higher goals. Gender issues are deterrents to development. Thus, it's important to address them in all spheres of life. Gender and development promotes equality of opportunity and treatment in all areas, equal access to safe and healthy working environments, and to social security, equality in obtaining meaningful career development, a balance between work and home life that is fair to both women and men, and an equal participation in decision-making at all levels. Gender and development is about being faithful to the principle that development is for everybody. Justice and equity demands that everyone in society, whether male or female, has the right to the same opportunities to achieve a full, satisfying, and peaceful life. Development that is gender responsive should: Number 1, expand or enlarge women's range of choices and opportunities. Second, deliberately address obstacles to women's effective participation in and their enjoyment of the benefits of development. And lastly, strengthen their capabilities to attain a full, satisfying, and peaceful life. So what is gender sensitivity? It is just a perspective. It is the way how we see things and how we accept things. Gender equality can only be achieved if the society as a whole must open up their minds to the reality that everyone, regardless of sex and gender, has the right to enjoy and be happy in the world. So what challenge lies ahead to the educators? Education must be a way that allows the society to understand and change its perspective into a more open reality. It has been said that gender roles and relations are resistant to change, but they don't change. Educators as well must be the frontliners of gender and development so that we can prevent violence among men and women and we can stand promoting the gender-fair society. About promoting war between sexes, this is not anti-men sentiment. This is not about reversal of roles. Gender and development is not only for women. This is about equality and equity, respect, and cultural revolution. I hope I made your day fruitful. Thank you very much and keep safe, everyone.